tide is turning, this is redemption's hour. In the midst of a world broken down, you're all we have now. Lost returning, salvation is all around. In the midst of a world broken down, you're all we have now. You are God and our hope is ours. Father, open the skies, flood the earth with your light. This is love to break a world indifferent. Our hearts are burning, a fire that won't burn out. In the midst of a world that's grown cold, you're all we have now. Is earth resounding the anthem of your renown? As we lift up our eyes and look up to your glory, call us out, let the world see you are God, and this hope is ours. Call us out, let the world see you are God, as we sing, open the skies, fill the earth with your light. This is love to break a world indifferent. As we lift up our eyes, fill our hearts with your fire. In a world the same will be the difference. To call us out, let the world see you are God, and this hope is ours. Eyes are open, every chain now broken. In this world, we are different. Let your love become us, as we live to make you famous. In this world, we are different. So call us out, let the world see you are God, as we say, open the skies, fill the earth with your light. This love to break a world indifferent. As we lift up our eyes, fill our hearts with your fire. In a world the same will be the different. So call us out, let the world see you are God, one and only in this world. You are all we have now.
All right, who passed the test? Who had all the words memorized? You're like, yes, I've been waiting for this day when I come into church and they're not giving anybody else words and I can show them that I know them. That's awesome. Good. I'm glad you were pumped about this morning too. We don't know technology has a mind of its own. So here's the deal. This is a beautiful picture of somebody, right? And it lets you know that we have 2 services every Sunday morning. In case you're going like, this was amazing, I need to do it twice every week. We actually meet upstairs at 9:32. A little bit different in the sanctuary, in case you're wondering. And then this happens at 11 o'clock, and we will remind you so that you can kind of remember that. Now, you can see it the whole service maybe. If you love to see words, we passed around, made some copies of lyrics like that. So they may be different songs, we don't know it yet. So if you start singing them, it doesn't really match up, we're really sorry. But if you want to cheat, now this is only for y'all. If you tell anybody else, all right, we're kicking you out of here, all right? If you turn around and look at the back, the confidence monitor still works. amazing, right? Our musicians are amazing, all right?
Our secrets, we do all the work.
But they cheat every week, all right? So if you want to, you can actually look back there too. And then you can make whoever's trying to stare straight ahead feel very awkward, all right? And awkward's good for all of us to experience at some point in life, is it not? So anyway, we apologize. We really don't know what has gone on this morning. Set everything up, and then it goes, you can see things in the back, but not up front. And so we can get this up there. And so you can see a beautiful picture that reminds you of a beautiful morning, and hopefully you'll enjoy that as we worship together this morning. I'm so glad you did make it in. Yesterday was an awesome day here at Midland with the Fall Festival, and so hopefully all of you got a chance to experience that a little bit. Thanks to all of our volunteers. Y'all are amazing. We're going to keep rolling with worship. Look at somebody close by, tell them good morning, and we're going to keep going.
new is the order of how things happen. So some of y'all are used to me saying a prayer and then y'all just sitting down and then doing an offering at the end of the service. We've shifted it for good reason. We'll talk about it another time. But we're going to do the offering this morning at this time for the next few weeks to see how it goes. So I'm going to invite you to be seated. I'm going to say a prayer for us, and then I want you to take a moment, fill out your connection cards, let us know you're here. The band's going to play some music. If you're done with your connection cards and all that kind of thing, you give online anyway, and you don't need the offering plates. You can take a moment just of reflecting, a moment of prayer for yourself. But this is just kind of one of those quieter moments in the service. We will have some music going. We'll have the offering plates come around, and you can kind of reflect how the week's been, how life is, what's coming, and maybe take a moment to entrust a few things and put them before God. So let's pray. God, we've come together this morning, and we've come together for something that's so much bigger and better than ourselves. God, it's a community. It's all of us living life alongside one another. God, being reminded that we're not alone. Being reminded, God, that life truly is better when we have a chance to be together. And so this morning, God, we ask that you take these moments that we have, God, whether it's just sitting next to each other, God, whether maybe it's a little bit of talking to or meeting some new folks, God, to remind us that life is so much better when we're reminded that we're not alone. There's folks to walk alongside us, to be with us, and that, God, you're working in their lives and you're working in our lives. God, to see amazing things happen. That's what we want to know. And so, God, we pray that you bless this time. God, the offering that we take up this morning, may it be for the furtherment of your kingdom. That's all we ask. Amen. As the musicians continue to play a little music for us, you'll see the offering plates come around.
What do y'all think? You like having the music before you come see me? I think it works pretty good, huh? It gives us a chance to get ready. All right, make sure we make room for all our friends to come up. Don't block the aisles. All right, I think y'all are just about here. You ready? What do we do first? That's right. 1, 2, 3. That's pretty amazing. I love hearing all y'all's voices. Hey, so I got a question. How many of y'all like snacks? How many of you get kind of grumpy when you need a snack? When the mama says you better put your hand up. When you need a snack, I get a little grumpy when I need a snack too. Do you know that in the Bible there's a story about someone who kind of got grumpy and needed a snack? No, really, there is. His name was Elijah, and he really needed a snack. Yeah. You have a friend named Elijah? That's pretty cool. So we're going to go read all about how there's one time Elijah really needed a snack. And I want y'all to be able to tell your parents how amazing that story is and what you learned from it, okay? So make sure we have our ears on. Y'all ready? All right, let's say a quick prayer. Dear God, thank you for loving me. Help me to be patient, to be understanding, and to listen. Amen. All right, little friends, let's head off.
Yeah. The fun times right there. How many people here today need a nap? Yeah, I'm with you. It's like sleeping is a good thing, isn't it? You know, and after yesterday, it was awesome. How many of y'all made it up here yesterday? You were volunteering, working, you were enjoying the evening or the morning and the afternoon. How many of y'all made it? Yeah, a couple people folks. It was awesome. There were a few people that came, in case you're wondering, and a few people were looking for a parking spot, and a few people found one. It was great. We had a lot of fun, and I think it may have been the most folks from our community that we've had at the Fall Festival here at Midland ever, which is pretty cool because as a lot of you probably know pretty well, we've said it for years that we feel we're called to be a church that's passionately growing together, but it's not just so we can be together, it's so that we can reach our community for Christ. And we say that, we truly mean that we think that Jesus brings a hope in life that all people need. And we don't expect them to have to come to us, but if they want to come and hang out on a big day like yesterday was, we're so grateful for the chance to be right alongside the folks throughout our community. And so it was really neat. Just from me as the guy who gets to be pastor around here at the church, thank you to all of our amazing volunteers that made it possible, because that is something that takes more and more and more people, from our folks that got the market stuff set up, I think got here like 5:45 to start meeting vendors to get set up, to our folks that stayed till after 4 o'clock making sure it all got cleaned up, to the ones that stayed with all the craziness of directing kids, you know, when they're having fun, to the ones that made sure that everyone who was trying to take care of an area had all they needed and ran errands for them, to our awesome hayride that circled around for the truck that was donated to the church for 4 hours, and for the awesome ride it was for people to be able to get in to the Fall Festival and back out to their cars. So really cool day. It was a great thing and a lot of fun. So thank you for all that were part of it and made it happen. We've got coming up now in the middle of November, we've got our big Thanksgiving dinner. In fact, if you take a look at your bulletin when you came in, hopefully you got one over here that gives you some stuff coming up. We got our Thanksgiving dinner, and that's kind of our new thing on there for this week to let you know. If you've never been to it here at Midland, it's pretty cool to get to do a Thanksgiving dinner around here, because there are a lot of so that's an awesome time. We also then in December is our big Christmas dinner, which is a little different. It's not cook your food and bring it up here. We actually have it all catered in, so you do have to pay some money for it, sorry. You know, we're looking for that time when we got lots of extra cash sitting around. We're like, hey, free dinner, you know, for Christmas for millions of people here at Midland. We can't do it yet, but one day maybe. So we'll have the money come out of how much it's going to cost to cover food for the evening. Usually it's right around $10 for an adult plate and less than that for a kid plate, but that'll be coming out. The cool part about this year is we haven't done this now in a long time, and we're going to have our kids putting on big production up here. And so if you love just hearing Christmas story told through the voices and lives of children, it's going to be awesome. I can look around, I can see some of our older kids now who have their siblings doing it. I'll look around, I'll see some parents that I see up here on Wednesday nights because they're here for rehearsal. If you haven't been able to make it out, no worries. You can come on out now. You can start now. If you can't make it on Wednesdays, except for occasionally maybe, that's okay too, because one of the very neat things is we have it available for you to listen to in your car all day, every drive, all right? So if you're a kid, it's like, I really want to do it, and you're like, I work every Wednesday night from 6 to 7 o'clock, I can't take you, then you just download that and you put it in your car. and you jam to that everywhere you go, all right? And when you get caught in traffic, you count it as a blessing, all right? It's just how it works. It's great. It's a lot of fun. We have parts going out, speaking parts for the kids as well. We got a young group. And it's going to be awesome to hear the story through them. So if you want to be there, all right, this is like I am old enough to be able to make noise through our 5th grade. Come on out Wednesday, 6 to 7. It's a lot of fun, good things happening. Also got some Bible study stuff going on. Men's Bible study 4:30, women's Bible study 4:30 here at the church. We have if you have kids in your house, all right, I don't care if they're babies to they're high school students, I'm ready to kick them out. If you have kids in your house, we have another one we're doing for parents. It's 5 o'clock. It's actually Emily and I are hosting it at our house right now. If you're interested in that, you can grab me or Emily right back there or put it on your connection card. We'd love to touch base with you and your family and get you connected in as well, because we have found that raising kids doesn't happen just by chance in a good way very often. There's some intentionality, and there's something about having other parents around to talk to that's pretty awesome too. So that's Bible study stuff that's available. Have I missed anything on big announcements? Have one more. It's kind of a prayer request and announcement, and some of you may know the Wagner family. If you go up to our sanctuary, which was built in 1891, the Jenkins family are the ones that actually raised that money and built that building that you see up there. It has had brick put on since then and some other updates, obviously, but that is still the same building from 1891. This guy named Vance Wagner moved around here or met this girl back in the 40s. It was a Jenkins girl, and they got married, and he ended up coming here to Midland and being a member of this church for over 60 years, and he passed away this week, and so his funeral is today at 2 o'clock at the McMullen Funeral Home. So we have some folks from the church that'll be there as well. If you know that family and want to be there, it's 2 o'clock. They'll have a short family visitation after the service today as well. But if not, it doesn't work for you today, just say a prayer for all the Wagner family during this time. 97, it's pretty good. But it always hurts to lose the folks you love. And so we remember him and celebrate his life and all that he was a part of this church for so many decades, and pray for that family as well. Anything else? Did I miss anything? Good. Last day of the little things. How many of y'all, if you've been here and heard, you found one of those little things, you're like, absolutely, that little thing is a big deal in life right there, and it doesn't stay little so long, it has a tendency to grow, and it's been very real for you. How many of y'all are like, no little thing ever bothers me, and it never gets too big for me? Okay, a couple of y'all are absolutely amazing people that we're going to look for doing a series actually next week starting of how to deal with the little things the real way. But we've been spending some time talking about just those little things in life that really have a way to add up over time and pack quite a punch. In fact, as we've been working our way through it and talking about it, what was that? Did y'all see that? What just happened? I don't know. I totally missed it. Did something? You fixed it? Okay, we'll put that thing up there then. Here we go. Whoa, check that out. That is amazing. God does miracles. Man, well done. All right, so y'all might get out of here on time. I have something to keep me on track now. This is great. I know, y'all are grateful too. God's blessings, they're amazing. Yeah, we said the little things add up and they pack a punch. And the crazy part about it is when you look at the little things in life, we talked about kind of each week that they can pack a punch and it can be for better or for worse. Y'all have noticed this thing, these little things in life, at some point you go, never thought something this amazing was going to happen. I thought it was just one of those little things you got to do, and yet now I look at it and go, wow. And there's those other parts of life you go, I didn't think it was a big deal until now, right? And things have really gone and added up on the other side. It's a really tough time. And so we said little things add up and pack a punch for worse or for better. And then as we got it going, we have this kind of theme verse that we look at each week, and it just kind of reminds us. So if you do need a nap because you were at the fall festival or because you're cheering for your football team all day and you're exhausted, whatever it is, and we understand it's a day of rest for us on the Sabbath, they say. But Ephesians 3:20 is where we've started each week, and it's actually where we're going to end again this week. And it's Paul, a letter that we attribute to Paul was writing to the church in Ephesus. And we know this is a letter that went to lots and lots of churches back in the day. And we just happened to find the one written to the church in Ephesus. He wrote these words to him. He said, now to him, to the God who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, And as we begin to look at the little things, for worse or for better, there's something that maybe is helpful to roll through our minds, and that's this idea of now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. And each week we've kind of set this up. And so on that first week as we were getting going, we said, what you've got goes a long way. And what you're given is always enough. I read that story about the little boy who had the loaves of bread and the fish, and Jesus like, how are we going to feed all these people? And one of his disciples were pretty confident, a good friend of Jesus, trying to be probably a little sarcastic. It's like, look what I found. Yeah, this boy has some lunch. Jesus, what do you think about that? And Jesus, what do you say? Great idea, absolutely. Get that lunch and let's feed them, And they're like, what? And he feeds the people, right? And at the end of the story, which made it even better, right? Because it wasn't just, what you got goes a long way. It doesn't matter if you feel gifted and all that. It goes a long way. But then at the end of it, you remember those basketfuls? How many basketfuls does they pick up? 12. Very good. One for each of his close friends that were doubting it could ever happen, right? He's like, oh, and by the way, guys, just a nice dinner for you as well, right? Pretty cool. What you're given is always enough. Now, to him, you're right. Now to him is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. Y'all getting that one in your head yet? Now, we went on. Second time, we were looking at things in life that, little things, big impact, words we speak. How many of y'all have suffered through this several times, right? You've been the perpetrator or the receiver, right? You're the one who your words like ruined today for somebody, or you receive those words and you're like, oh my gosh, seriously? We're going to go there today? Y'all been there? The power of the tongue, right? Our tongues have a power like nothing else. What you say goes a long way. In fact, James he's a little negative and pessimistic, we think, because we don't like going as far as he went with it. But in James, this letter, that's a very practical, book in the Bible, he says, no human being can tame the tongue, right? Because a lot of times we're like, I will count down from 10 and I will not say things that are hurtful to other people, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and then it comes out anyway, right? You have those times where you're being intentional about it, and then somebody does that one thing they should not have done because that is what sets you off, and out it comes again, and you're starting all over. There's something about the tongue, it's hard to control. And yet, when we focus it in on ourselves, and we talk about ourselves being able to tame the tongue, it's probably where we go wrong. Because there's something about focusing in on ourselves that will probably put us in a big mess. We found it every week to be the case, actually, that maybe the better place to begin is knowing that there will words that will come to our minds and out our mouths faster than we can recognize what it is, right? Now to him, who's able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. And maybe there's something about starting with bringing things before God. I know for somebody who has to talk a lot, it's like my job to talk, that there's a lot of times I'm like, God, please fix these words before they get to the ears of the people that hear them, right? Because I have no doubt I can mess it all up. Now, we've got to our little things, number 3, and we talked about arrogance. It's always fun to ask if there's any arrogant people here today. Because very seldom does somebody raise their hand, just so you know, all right? Very seldom. Oh, we have a confession of sin this morning. Very good. Now, arrogance is one of those things. It's like, I've met arrogant people, but it's not me, right? Because there's always somebody out there that's more arrogant than I am. But the crazy part of life is a little arrogance is the very thing that drives us to take it into our own hands. If I phrase that a little bit differently, and I didn't ask who's arrogant here today, because everybody's like, I'm not arrogant, all right? But if I said, how many of y'all love to be in control? How many of you would raise your hand? If I said, how many of y'all love to be the ones to determine what's really going to happen? How many of you would raise your hands? How many of you would say, I love for somebody else to determine how my life would go? How many of y'all would raise your hands? Okay, one person. I'm not going to call you weird to your face. I'm going to look at somebody else right now, okay? But you know this. It's like human nature, right? We want to be able to control it and get it to go the way we think is best, because at the end of the day, we might not know best, but I'm willing to give it a shot to know best at least. This idea of a little arrogance drives us to take it into our own hands. Well, as we're reading through it, the crazy part about this idea of a Messiah, which the Jewish people had looked for, longed for, awaited for so long, and then this title gets assigned to Jesus as the Christian movement begins, that Jesus wasn't the one to come in and conquer the enemies and drive them out and take possession of the land. In fact, as we read, Jesus was described about humility and taking on the offenses of the cross. A way to die that was in no way respected whatsoever. And that's what he took on. And so this idea of one who was willing to lay down everything and die a death that brought about no respect in those days, the offenses of the cross bring us to say, now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, to humble ourselves and go, God, we're going to trust that you can work in the midst of it, and I don't have to be the one that gets it all done. Number 4, we're almost there. We're almost there. Y'all catching back up? Who's remembering? You've been here every week. You're like, I remember this every time. That's right, because if you said you did, you'd be lying probably, all right? Trustworthy with very little goes a long way. It's a crazy story in the Bible. You should read it sometimes. It's the story that comes just a chapter before what we're reading today. It's in Luke chapter 16. One of the most debated parables in the Bible. It's a parable story Jesus used to teach. And he tells about that dishonest manager, right? His master who's over him, commends him for his dishonesty. And we're like, what in the world do you do with a parable where, the dishonest man gets commended by the master? Because oftentimes, the master is God, and the manager is who we're supposed to be. And it's like, okay, dishonesty. And yet as we read Jesus' teachings directly after that, we find maybe a little bit of sarcasm in those words he spoke for the parable. And we pulled out of this idea that, trustworthy with very little goes a long way. And y'all know this. This is kind of how trust begins with a lot of us. We'll entrust somebody with a little bit of things. If they prove trustworthy, we'll give them a little more responsibility, right? Yes, you can stay out until 8 o'clock, all right? 8 o'clock tonight, and then you be home at 8, and we'll talk about 8:05 next time. You know how this works. But the crazy part about it is that when trustworthy with very little goes a long way, the other side of it as it swings is to be dishonest with very little also goes a long way. And when somebody's dishonest, maybe about just one of those small things in life, it impacts whether you're willing to trust them with anything else as well, isn't it? They maybe don't see it as that important, but the idea of trust matters so much to us. And so, once again, we said there's something about getting past ourselves when it comes to this idea. And getting past ourselves is one of the hardest things to do. And not trying to take it all back into my own hands to figure it all out, to be the dishonest manager who stands for personal gain instead of one who's willing to say, I messed it up, and allow things to come that aren't in your control. Which brought us back to the idea. Now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. And then last week, and this is the fun one to set us up for today, forgiveness. Forgiveness. What do you need a little more of to handle disputes in those times when someone hurts you? Forgiveness. Forgiveness. And how many of y'all are good at forgiving people a time or 2 or 3 or 4? Right? We read this story, and Jesus is teaching on this idea of how forgiveness plays into life. And Peter asked, how many times do we have to forgive somebody now? You're saying 7 times to forgive somebody? He's picking a number, 7 complete idea number. And Jesus looks at him and he goes, not just 7, but 77. Or maybe you read in some translations, 70 times 7. And we found it to be so true that Jesus, as he's living out this life and demonstrating what it means to find life and live together as a community, that, oh no, it stopped. Bam, there it is. We're always called to forgive a little more. Always called to forgive a little more. When you think you've forgiven enough, Jesus would look at you and say, yeah, just forgive them a little bit more. And when you think you've forgiven them enough, that he would look at you and say, hey, just forgive them a little bit more. And how hard is that to do? How hard is that to do, right? We said forgive them a little more. But it's hard to forgive a little more again and again. And yet at the same time, bam, it's hard to be together without a little more grace found in love. And so if we're able to live life alongside one another, if life truly is better together, this is a key part of it for us in all parts of our life. A little more forgiveness. Now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine. We're all caught up. I feel good. Y'all feel good? I was tired. Now I'm tireder. We're going to wrap up today. Good news for y'all. It's only 2 verses we're reading today. Y'all pretty pumped about that? And I'm not one of those preachers that people leave and go, he took 3 words and preached for an hour. All right? 3 words, usually it's pretty short with me. All right? So I can keep it short today. But we come to this place where we're talking about the things in life that we come across and the call to forgive. This week, I want to look at this quote that I thought was a pretty helpful quote. It says, it's all too easy to notice what one lacks rather than to recognize gifts already received. And as you look around at our world today, how many of y'all could say, I can see this happening all the time? I can see this happening all the time. It's all too easy to notice what one lacks rather than to recognize gifts already received. For some of us, our minds turn to that spoiled brat that's in our kids' class. You know what I'm talking about? And you went to the party, and your kid went to the party, and all they did was throw down the gifts and go, I need another one, right? And you're like, oh, wow, that is not my child, right? For some of us, we go, no, it's not the kid, it's that adult that does that. Y'all know that adult, that always needs something else, that's never satisfied, that always, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is all it is, right? Met that person? And we can go here with this. Easy to notice what one lacks, right? Someone else has more, and I deserve as much as they do. Then it is to recognize the gifts already to receive. But today I want to shift it away a little bit from just this idea of those who love to have more and think they deserve more, however you want to look at that. But also, I want to look at that person who maybe has been around this idea of faith and maybe Christian faith and other faiths out there and feels there's always this call to have greater faith, to have greater faith. And they're the very people that become so fraught with this idea of, I've never had enough faith, I'm not sure I ever will. And that's who I want to look at today. So if that's you, I want to try to talk to you some, because that is also me on a lot of days. We have these times in life, and I'm not sure if you notice them, that here's the question for you. I'll put it out there. How much faith does a person need? That's what we're going to be answering hopefully today in some way with this text. How much faith does a person need? Because I'm someone who can look around, and maybe you're this way as well, and we can find somebody else, and we're like, oh my gosh, they are so faithful. Or we look at them and we go, they have such great faith. I can't imagine dealing with all they're dealing with in their life right now. And somehow they manage to still say, but you know what? God is a good God. And you're like, that's impossible. How in the world did they get that? I mean, I get that out of my mouth because life's been good for the past couple of days. The past couple of weeks, the past couple of months, it's been all right. So I'm perfectly fine saying God is good. But if I went back to a time when I was going through the hard times, I don't know if I could have said it. And if I was ever facing what they're facing, there's no way those words are coming out of my mouth. You ever been there before and noticed these things that can happen? It's like, oh my gosh, how in the world can these people have such great faith? This idea of faith is what we base everything on. And maybe you've heard some of the teachings. And if you've been around me, when it comes to faith for me, I'm going to shift, by the way, on the way we're going to look at something that maybe you've heard before. It's a very short parable of Jesus's. Because faith, I've always wondered about faith. I've always wondered if I'm really a person of faith. I've always wondered if my faith is good enough, because I've heard so many people talk about, like, all you got to do is believe. How many of y'all have heard this before? All you got to do is believe. And you're like, dadgummit, you know what? I'd rather just have to go do 100 push-ups and 10,000 jumping jacks and have to figure out how to make myself believe something, right? Anybody with me on this? Like, there's some things in life that are just a lot easier than making myself try to believe. And so for somebody to tell me all you got to do, I'm like, there's no all you got to. That's a tough task for me. And some days I do, and some days I'm not sure I do, right? Some days I have great faith, and I'm like, God is amazing and does great work still in this world today. And some days I'm like, God, I'm really kind of wondering if you're hanging around or not. Did you get busy? I know there's a lot going on. I get it. But just let me know, And I want to look at this idea today in a teaching that Jesus has, in just in very few words, because I think that too often times we find ourselves at that place in life where we think the challenging commands and things that other people face would just be too much for us to ever have that kind of faith. And maybe we're missing the point completely. With someone who's been so faithful, and we look at them and we say, man, they have such great faith. Maybe once again, our faith has come to that place of seeming completely inadequate, no matter where it has been. Too small, our faith seems too weak and too insignificant. And this question becomes real. How much faith does a person need? So it's in Luke chapter 17, verse 5. We read 16. I told you all that crazy story. Remember the crazy story about that shrewd manager, dishonest manager, who gets commended by his master. You then have Jesus do a couple of teachings, and he comes to this place which, man, when I talk about this one, I'm going, this is a tough spot right here. Before this one, if you've ever read it, it says, do not cause one of these little ones to fall. And sometimes we think that means children, which it probably does refer to children, but it may also be referring to people that are young in their faith. Do not cause them to stumble, because if you cause someone else to have be a stumbling block for someone, it would be better for you. Have you heard this one before? Yeah, this is great, isn't it? It's better for you to have one of those big rocks tied around your ankles and then thrown into the water. And you're like, oh, great. So do not be a stumbling block. In fact, this is that idea of never. I love these extremes, like never be a stumbling block. Great, all right. I've definitely done that before. Anybody else been a stumbling block before? Don't lie to yourself. That's right. We probably all have been there before, all right? Yep. And then the other one right after that, right, is where he does the teaching on forgiveness in the Gospel of Luke, which is the one we read last week in Matthew, where it's like, you know, how many times do I need to forgive? He goes, just keep forgiving, just keep forgiving. So it's like, never cause someone to stumble, always forgive. Never this and always that. And for me, I'm going, those are the ones that like drive me nuts now. Maybe it's because I have 4 kids, and I remember my days of always telling my parents, you never, 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 and you always, always, always. And now we're getting to our stage of life, we're hearing that a lot, and I'm going, man, that junk is in the Bible too. And then the very next thing that Jesus says is, as the disciples hear this, of course, if they're anything like us, I think this is an adequate response. They look over at Jesus and they say to him, they say, the apostles said to the Lord, those are close friends of Jesus, increase our faith. It's like, dang, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that. You know, like, I'm always going to be a stumbling block somehow to somebody. You know, I'm trying to forgive it. Did you hear what they did? You know? And they look at Jesus, and this is awesome. I mean, they're way better than a lot of us. A lot of us are like, to heck with you, bud. We're out now, right? But they look to Jesus, and they go, oh, increase our faith. Give us more faith. We want to get it right. We want to be able to always and never. And listen to how, you know, we get this going on. I read this. This is great. It says, proximity to Jesus does not guarantee unwavering faith. That was my encouraging part of this whole thing when I read it, right? Is I'm going, man, if the ones that got to follow Jesus around everywhere he went felt like that, I feel a little bit better about myself now, for one thing, right? Because how many of you have ever been in that place where you're going, increase my faith? We said it in another way, not so kind, and you know, but we're like, give me reason, right, to keep believing on these things, God. I want to get it right, and I want to trust that you are God, and you create, and you love, but you got to increase my faith, because I ain't getting this right on my own, right? You do it, God. That this actually was happening with those who are hanging out with Jesus on a regular basis. They got to roll with Jesus day in and day out, and they hear this teaching and they go, wow, increase our faith. They find themselves at the same spot we find ourselves. In fact, these are the ones that, if you don't know the stories, when they were hanging out with Jesus just before this, we get to read how Jesus comes to them and says, hey, come follow me, and they drop everything they've got. They leave their life, their jobs, even some of them family, right? Staying at home while they go out and follow Jesus around as he travels. That's pretty big faith, is it not? And these are the same ones that when they're out on that boat later on, you know, they're hanging out with Jesus. The storm comes. Have you ever heard this story before? Storm comes, boat starts rocking. Jesus is doing what? He's orchestrating it all. No, he's taking a nap, right? He's taking a nap because Jesus, the rock of the boat, helps him sleep maybe. You know, so Jesus is napping like some of y'all need to do right now, I know. And so Jesus is napping. They freak out, run to Jesus, wake him up. They're like, oh my gosh, save us, right? And he's like, you have little faith. You remember the story? You have little faith. And he calms the storm, which is pretty amazing. You know, plenty of times we've gone, please calm the storm. You have little faith. A little bit later on, he begins to talk with them. And he's telling this parable, and he says this. He says in Luke chapter 12, just a few chapters before we're at today, he says that this is how God clothes the grass of the field. How much more will he clothe you? And what does he say then? You of what? You have little faith. You have little faith. You have little faith. You have little faith. This idea of little faith showing up. And so now in our story here, they're like, increase our faith. We are the ones of little faith. You've noticed this as well, Jesus. And his response to them, right, is this. He says, he replied, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed. Anybody know about mustard seed stuff in the Bible? This is like a Jewish thing, right? Because we grow out of the Jewish faith. In the Jewish faith, the mustard seed was always used to refer to something that was very, 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 very small. Now, this is like just a literary use of a word, right? I hear mustard seed. I really don't know much about mustard seeds, if you know the truth. Maybe y'all do. But I've been told that they're small. But in the Jewish literature, even if you don't think they're small enough, it was a way to say the smallest of the small. So for them at this time, this idea of faith as small as a mustard seed means the tiniest little bit of faith. Tiniest little bit of faith. Tiniest little bit. You can say to this mulberry tree, now mulberry trees were known back in the day. In fact, if you read a little bit further along in Luke 19, you have this little man. Zacchaeus was the wee little man who ran up and got in the tree. And we're pretty confident it's the same type of tree, the tree he climbed up in and the tree that's being referenced right here in the Gospel of Luke. It says, if you can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted. Now, for us sitting around looking at that today, we're like, okay, what is that talking about? If you're like me, when you read the Bible, I go back to being a child at the bus stop. Anybody know where Beaver Run's at? And that's where I went to my bus stop every day. It's like when you come into the old Beaver Run right there. And lots of stories I can tell you about that. But they had these little pine trees, I think they were, that started popping up when we were there. And we were like, this is awesome. We're going to go plant these pine trees. So we would pull them out of the ground. We'd dig around, try to get as much of the roots as we could. And for some reason, we believed if we'd get paper towels when we got to school and put that wet paper towel around them, they'd make it through the day just fine. We could plant those things at home and grow them. And we would pull them things out of the ground. You know what I'm saying? And when in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, man, I used to uproot them things all the time. So if I would be able to look at maybe not a mulberry tree, but at my little pine tree growing there and say, be uprooted. But for these people back in the day, they weren't thinking about that little tiny thing that you would pluck at the bus stop. They were thinking about this mulberry tree that was known to have roots that would grow so deep and spread so wide, you weren't allowed to plant them within 70 feet of a water source because they were afraid it would break the well and cut out the water from that source. And so you had to plant it. Now, our room in here, I think, is it 80 feet maybe or something like that? So you think of this circumference all the way around a spot of a well that you couldn't plant one of these trees because it might bust that thing up because the root system was so strong in it. So for the people during this day, when they heard something about a mulberry tree, they would have been thinking this thing that has a solid foundation, be uprooted. You can say to this mulberry tree, be uprooted and planted in the sea. Have y'all looked that up before? How many of y'all plant your trees in the sea, right? I found one tree, it's beautiful, that can grow in water, but that's the only one I could find, and it wasn't called a mulberry tree or a sycamore tree, crazy enough. And so Jesus is saying you could uproot this thing that has the most vast root source that we would see in the trees back in the day would know, and you could say that thing, be planted in the sea, and guess what? It would obey you. When I read this story, I begin to think about this idea of faith as small as a mustard seed that could uproot a mulberry tree and plant it where it doesn't grow typically, and it would obey. There's something powerful about a little faith. We come back to that question we started with, and we said, how much faith does a person need? An author wrote this. He said, when it comes to faith, Jesus suggests that size does not matter. Even a seed of faith holds tree-like potential. When you see someone who has been so faithful, and you look at them and you say, man, they have such great faith, and you begin to once again find your faith to be inadequate, maybe it's because we focused on the wrong thing. You see, when we become so focused on a person of faith, we've directed our eyes away from the one to have faith in, and we've directed them at the person here who has faith. And I think this is how we miss it a lot of times. We begin to compare ourselves, and in some way, we create an idol of our own. I just want to be like them and have faith like them. We forget about looking to the one who's always demonstrated the great faith for us. Because at the end of the day, there's something about this idea of faith and our faith being inadequate. When you find your faith inadequate, you're focused on the wrong thing. When you become focused on a person of faith, I think you lose sight of the one that's worth having faith in. And when you lose sight of the one worth having faith in, it's easy to see your faith as useless. And this, I'm afraid, is what happens to too many of us. And when our faith becomes useless, we lose faith completely. I feel like too many people walk away from that. And I feel like too often times in the world of the church, we call people to be of such great faith. And when we feel inadequate, we say, I just don't quite fit into this whole thing. And the problem with that, for me, is not just the whole faith side, it's that we've redirected of it. And when we redirect our attention off of one worth having faith in, we find no reason for it anymore. And when we do that, we find life is tough. And when we lose this faith, we find ourselves lost looking for somewhere else to put it. Because you will put your faith in something, and it's a guarantee. For us as people of faith, I really feel like it comes back to it's all too easy to notice what one lacks rather than recognize the gifts that is being given that we've already received. You see, when you ask the question of how much faith does a person need, I think it's right back where we were before. It's where we've been all series long. And we say, you know what, when I begin to think about my faith, me trying to get it right and focusing on myself, which by the way is not the most helpful thing in the world to try to do in the first place, that maybe I need to look out again now to the one who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. and when my faith feels inadequate. So focusing my attention on those great, faithful people that I want to try to in some way model or become like, that maybe that's missing it again. And when I become so focused in on myself of trying to generate a faith within myself to really believe it, like I'm supposed to really believe and really have faith in, that maybe I've missed it again, and maybe I just need to know that a little faith goes a long way. A little faith goes a long way. In fact, instead of worrying about the size of your faith, perhaps you should just take another step in whatever faith you have. Because a little faith, I believe, goes a long way. And it's not because that our faith is the rule, but it's because there is one who's already had the faith. That is all about being immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. And so if you're like me, when you go through your days of great faith and your days of no faith, and you have your times where you're going, I'm so glad we have a faithful God, and you have other times where you're going, I'm wondering where that faithful God has wandered off to, then maybe we can take those moments of not focusing it back in on ourselves too much, and maybe just hear the words once again, and know that little bit sure does go a long way. Let's pray. God, as we close it up for this series, looking at all the little things in life, God, the little things that turn out to be great, the little things that turn out to be so tough, that God, we'd also be willing to be a people who have maybe just a little bit of faith. And to know that little bit of faith, God, doesn't come because we'll be able to manufacture it or get it on our own, but it happens in those moments when we redirect the attention away from ourselves, from our abilities to figure it out, get it all straight. But begin, God, to hear the words, now to the one who's able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine. This morning, God, I pray that those are words that resonate with us day in and day out, that as we wonder, as we struggle, we realize it's not about our faith and how good it can be, but it's about the awesome and amazing faith of Jesus and what he's already done on our behalf, that very thing that brings us life. And God, may we all experience in the here and now and forevermore. It's in your name we pray. Amen. I'm going to invite you to your feet as we're going to close in this time of worship. which is a really cool thing. Is in Midland we talk about we may be a church on the corner down there, but for us it's really about being a family. And one of the things I love is getting to know some of our folks. And so I want to invite Ken and Suzanne to come join me up here for a minute, because these are some folks that I've gotten to know, and I know other parts of their family too. And we talked a couple weeks ago. Suzanne said, we kind of like it around Midland. We think we like hanging out around y'all folks over there. And so today we want them not just to be, around us folks, but to just be one of our folks. And so I want to ask y'all a question here. Will you faithfully participate in the ministries here at Midland with your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and your witness?
Yes.
Yes. I want to be the first ones to welcome y'all officially to the family here this morning. It is awesome to get a chance to serve alongside folks like you. And so here's what we're going to do. They have to hang out with me for just a minute, all right? Nobody wants to hang out with preachers. I get that, all right? But for just a minute on Sunday morning, we're going to stand right over here. As y'all are heading out this morning, if you get a chance just to officially kind of welcome them. They've been worshiping with us for a while now, but just to kind of make it official that we always say at Midland, there's another seat at the table. If you'd like to join us at Midland, just officially be a part of the Midland family, you let us know. We actually had Wanda, who came from San Antonio, been over here for a little while now, joined at 9:30 this morning, and we get to officially welcome y'all as well. So we just always have another seat at the table, so we look forward to welcome you. So if you don't mind, we'll go right over here. Go forth in peace. The grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, the love of the Father, and communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen. We'll see y'all next time.